putting in my my next book, and the next book I want to be calling Kingdom Ecosystems. But basically, everything that we do here in El Pozo, and also with 27 million, all the experience that we have as far as justice, we do it. These thoughts and these ideas are already integrated into everything that we do. So I want to start off by talking about kingdom justice as opposed to social justice. Okay, those two things are not the same thing. Social justice has like this process through which things develop. So because there's certain development that happens when you think about social justice. And this comes a lot from also, you know, sociology, anthropology, all the social development, social work, all that stuff. So within the social justice kind of framework, there's what begins is a kind of like an assistance or I don't know what the word is in English, asistencialismo, like where you are providing assistance, whether it be an NGO or government, that is providing assistance to a community that is in need, that is marginalized, that may have some issues that it's dealing with, or you might be addressing a certain social ill, a social problem. It might be like drug abuse, it might be poverty, whatever it might be. There's some assistance that happens in the very beginning. And then once you have that assistance kind of like pumping through or community by either an organization or by government or some different type of actors that are trying to push in resources, you start gaining community engagement or community involvement. And that's when where you're like, for example, I'll say the example just for right after this. And then afterwards, you go to the long-term stage, which is more like social reform, right? So like it might be legislative reform, it might be some type of reform with an infrastructure, it might be some type of other reform that happens within that community. So the example I always use is, let's say, for example, and it's not because we're going through, I used this example before COVID, but imagine there's a community that you've identified that has a high level of communicable disease because of low hygiene, right? So you discover, well, this community needs, if they just knew how to wash their hands well, right? You would see a decrease in the disease that is spread, right? And so it might be a community of 5,000 people, let's say, for example, in a marginalized part of an urban context, right? And you go in and you say, you trained 500 people, 10% of the people how to wash their hands well and how important that is. And then you gave them soap, and that's the asistencialismo, right? There's the assistance that you're providing, the guidance, the resources. And then the next stage is a community engagement, community involvement, community development that happens. So the community, you do this training, okay? And so, and what's really important here to understand is that it's, you say you've trained 500 people how to wash their hands. That's not impact yet. Many people or many churches, many ministries, organizations, they'll turn around and say, oh, we impacted the community. But that's just a short-term thing, right? So we have to be very careful with that, the terminology that we use, because what you have is a result, a short-term result. You don't have a long-term impact, because impact means you've actually changed something, right? But you need to have those results and build the results upon results upon results to get an impact, right? But what needs to happen in the midterm is a change of mindset and also a change of activity or behavior, right? Social behavior needs to start changing. right? So let's say that you go to this community and then there's like, you go back 3 months later and you see those 500 people are still washing their hands well, right? But they're not only washing their hands well, they're teaching their neighbors, oh, this is how you wash your hands. These people came 6 months ago, they taught us how to wash our hands well, and so on and so forth, right? So, so everybody starts washing their hands well, and they're like, oh, well, you know what? We also think there's other dirty things in our neighborhood, right? So they say, well, we have an open sewer system, for example. I don't know if you've ever been to a community where they have open sewers, where there's like all the water is just kind of, they just dig a trench and then all the water and the peas and the poops and then they all just kind of flow out in open air. And so they're like, this is bad for hygiene. So we want to have a closed. So what they do is they organize amongst themselves to build, it might be something temporary, right? And then there's they organize themselves in the community action, and then they petition the government to come in and bring in a legitimate drainage system, right? And then you go back 2 years, 3 years later, and then you see the communicable disease in that whole community has gone extremely down because of an action that you took 2-3 years ago, right? So the thing is, many times we don't have that full view of how that needs to go from point A to point Z, right? All through the letters of the alphabet, all those micro things that need to happen along the way, because you may have to come back and reinforce. You may have to come back and help the community organize itself. You may have to find out from the community, hey, we want this drainage system put in. Do you know anybody within government that can help us put that in? Oh, yes, we have the contact, so on and so forth. So there are all these things that you have, someone that who is engaging within a community, and there are outside factors, outside resources that need to be engaged and leveraged in order for change to happen. Okay. Now, the social justice or social development, that's kind of like the pattern or the flow that we look into. Now, kingdom justice is not just within the church. And then kingdom justice is not just compassion. Okay. If you look at the church and you look at like, let's say, for example, I don't have it with me, but if you had a quadrant, right, of your relationship with people to people and people to the world, right? I'm sorry, people and God, right? And so if you look at the quadrant, a lot of people, the churches, they address how to help people who are in their relationship with God and a little bit in their relationship with each other, right? But they don't know how to really address things that are beyond that, right? That can really start shaping and shifting society and shifting culture, right? And so when we think about kingdom justice, I believe kingdom justice transcends what we may think is just social justice, and it transcends how the church normally interacts with its communities. Number one, I think I believe kingdom justice is holistic. Okay, what do I mean by that? It's 360 in its nature and tries to cover all of the issues. Like, for example, in El Pozo de Vida, or the Well of Life, our programs here have addressed human trafficking in the areas of prevention, intervention, and restoration. Why in those 3 areas? So I always use this example. Imagine you're walking in the forest and you're by yourself and you're next to a river, and all of a sudden you hear this baby crying. You turn around and you see this baby floating down the river in a basket. Okay, what are you going to do? You're going to jump in and save that baby, right? And then you hear another baby. You turn around, you see another baby floating down the river in a basket. You're going to go jump in and save that baby. And then another, and then another, and then another. So eventually you're going to ask yourself a series of questions, right? What are those questions? Like, where are they coming from? Where they're going? Now I have 500 babies here. What am I going to do with these 500 babies? Right? So the work of prevention is to go upstream and try to address the issue before it starts, understand all the push and pull factors. You need to, if you begin to understand all the push, meaning the factors that actually push the baby or pull the babies into that situation, and then you might need to bring awareness and education about the issue. You might want to, for intervention, for example, you're going to have to get in the water at first, right? And you might get wet. But you might say, oh, I can build a dam, right? Or I can build nets or have sticks that I can just fish the babies out, effectively. Basically, you begin to start thinking, using this analogy, of the tools and the resources you have. What are also some things about infrastructure that you can help build, right, to prevent things to happen? And then the restoration part is a whole marathon work, right? How are you going to connect these babies with their mothers or with their parents, or are there any other social networks that they have? How am I going to continue to care for them? That is a little bit of a longer process. Do they have any trauma? Do they need psychological support? Whatever, all that type of stuff. And this model of looking at things, or social ills, or social or justice issues, or injustice issues, with prevention, intervention, and restoration in mind, and having that approach is a very holistic approach, because you want to cover all three areas. Now, the issue is most organizations, when they start off, they're only going to start off in one of the three. Okay. But you're going to ask yourself those questions, even if you might be the one that's just upstream, or you might just be caring for the babies, one or the other. In our particular case, we were just caring for the babies. And then we realized, well, wait a minute, what can we do to help those who are at risk? And what can we help prevent future victims of trafficking? So those are questions that you will ask. And during the whole life cycle of a person going from innocent to victim to survivor, that whole life cycle, right, of what was happening, you want to start touching all those areas. And so to be able to touch those areas effectively, and as organizations, we need to start considering, right, that first and foremost, one organization cannot do everything. Like they cannot be the only solution to the problem. As much as you have amazing staff, amazing programs, you need to begin to interact with other entities, right? And that's where I'm looking a lot more into what does that ecosystem look like? Because ecosystems, if you think about it, are constantly happening. There's constant interaction within different organizations, agencies, institutions, government. All these things are constantly interacting with one another. And how do you start moving them into a direction where it would help and serve the communities well in an effective way? Okay, so I'll give you guys an example of an ecosystem that has now become an institution. Okay, An ecosystem that has not become an institution is, for example, at one point in time, there were the church or NGO or ministry that was given tax deductible like status, right? Where someone in the private sector, whether it be a company or people, give to them, the government, the third party, says, okay, whatever you give them, I will give you a deduction on your taxes. You can give to them, and then you can deduce, deduct that from the taxes that you owe me, right? Now, we all understand that, and we all know that, but at one point in time, that was not happening. There was a moment where that system was not set up. So that system gets set up because people want to give to these type of causes or institutions or whatever it might be. Government also needs civil society to do certain things that government cannot do, right? Civil society told government, you need to give me more money or more funding, right? So that I can operate, because I can't always do your job for you, basically, So what happened is that this system got set up, this ecosystem where they were working and amongst one another got set up so that an institution gets established that benefited all parties. Okay, and as a result, it benefited society. Now, those type of ecosystems or interchanges and conversations need to happen more often. Now, most of the time, we're not engaged in those conversations because our mindset isn't, we're not ready for it. We're only thinking about, just as a nonprofit or a ministry, we're only thinking about, I just need to get money. I just need to find how to get money in order to operate. Okay, that's very self-serving, right? It's just kind of like, you're only about yourself, and it's selfish, at the end of the day, right? You have to think, I operate within this ecosystem, and I need to be more than just have a symbiotic relationship with society. What do I mean by that? Yeah, you've seen those where they have those like those little fish that kind of swim with like sharks, and they just kind of eat off of like parasites off the sharks, right? That's like that. And so, you're just a small little fish, swimming along a big shark, and you're just eating like the little parasites off the shark. That's not how God intended the church to interact with society. Like this symbiotic small fish style of, because the church has life, brings new life, a new mindset, a kingdom reality that needs to be brought here to earth, right? That reality needs to be made real here. Now, what we're doing, unfortunately, is just thinking of it as, okay, well, big churches and large Christian events, right? That really are very, very short-sighted. We need to start realizing that there's constant ecosystems and interactions that are happening within society, and we cannot be on the fringe and just be a symbiotic and just eat the crumbs that fall off, right? That's not the intent. We've been given authority to disciple nations. but we're not discipling nations. We need to take that role. And the only way we take that role is interacting and engaging with people within the mover, like, I want to say movers and shakers. I mean, we need to engage more with our communities. So with that, I'd like to talk more about ecosystems and tell you guys a story about where we're at and where we think we're going with this, okay? So, and this, we talk, so I mentioned this story and this to be the thing about the free class, because you'll see what I talk about and all the little aspects of it interwoven within the Justice School. Like the Justice School will speak about all these different elements, you know, about how to bring about the impact and how to have that more, that worldview that's more kingdom, more of a kingdom mindset, okay? And I do need to make a note here, like, I think what's really important for us is that we are not trying to make our organization big, okay? That doesn't mean that we intentionally keep it small, okay? I use this analogy. You may have said this prayer at one point in time in your life. You may have said a prayer, God, I want to do great things for you. You know, I don't know if you ever said that prayer. God, I want to do great things for you. He totally changed my mind and my mindset when I got challenged and I felt I was in this conversation with God, you know, right? And God says, well, oh, you want to do great things for me, huh? You know, I'm like, yeah, I want to do all these amazing things. I want to do great things, you know? And I was like, you know, those things aren't so great, you know? I'm great. So I was like, whoa, yeah, you're right. you're right. So I was like, okay, maybe I need to change my prayer. And I say, I want to do things for a great God. I want to do things for a great God, not great things for God. Because the great needs to go on God, not on the things. God is great, not the things. No matter how awesome the work is, it's just stuff, it's just things. God is great. So if God is great, that changes my whole paradigm and how I operate, right? So constantly, it is God who gets glory, God who's doing the amazing things. He's the one that's moving things. And so I'm not the one that's, you know, working so like hard to make things great. Okay. I just have to approach with humility, open hands, and willingness to work with others, you know? And so, we got the SEGOP, which is Secretaría de Gobernación, which is basically the State Department in the US side of things. The federal government asked us, okay, within this particular administration, they have asked us, we have identified 17 communities or municipalities that have high violence and high risk, like drug violence, human trafficking, etc. And we want to work for peace. We want to reconstruir el tejido social. They want to work to recreate the social fabric, okay, of those communities. So they've asked us to come in and to talk about human trafficking in particular, specifically. So we went to an organization of one that was close by. It was great. Then from there, they asked us to go to Mexicali, which is on the border with the United States. And then they did this analysis and review of all of the different programs that they've been running in all the 17 centers. And they said, the work that you have done has had the best results. And so we were like, oh, wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much. So posterior to that, then we got contacted by this organization in one of the same community centers, but in a city called Tenancingo, right? And Tenancingo, Tlaxcala, there's a couple of things that you need to know about Tenancingo, Tlaxcala. Tenancingo, Tlaxcala is in a state that is northeast of Mexico City. And in that city that is northeast of Mexico City, there's a couple of things. There are like jokes, like even people from Tlaxcala that say, the state doesn't even exist. Like, we don't even exist, right? Like one of our staff members, her boyfriend was from Tlaxcala, and he says, oh, we don't even exist, you know? Historically, like even very, very far back during the Spanish, like during the Conquista, the Tlaxcala, they were the ones that sided with the Spaniards, con los españoles. So they were considered almost like traitors, almost, you know. Tlaxcala, their escudo, the state's escudo seal is a seal that's from Spain. It's not even a Mexican seal. Okay, why are all these things important? Because you need to study, you need to know, you need to understand the root causes of things. Okay, I'll give you one example of why we look at root causes. Like when we look at sex trafficking has its roots in gender violence. Gender violence has its roots in gender inequality. Gender inequality has its roots in cultural norms. So when we launched a campaign 2 years ago on machismo, and it was called Nadie nace macho, no one's born macho. So you need to do that analysis. So we studied Tlaxcala. And the other thing about Tlaxcala is most of the roses that come to the city to Mexico City are from Tlaxcala. They have a budding, meaning like a growing ecotourism industry. They have a large carpinteria or carpentry industry. And the industry that's also traditional, very traditional, is these things called rebosos, which are kind of like, you know what baby Bjorns are? Where, you know, the baby, you know, the mom has a baby and they put the baby here and it just wraps the baby, you know. The traditional one that's like side sling with the baby here, that the traditional rebozo with the babies that's comes out of Tlaxcala. So we knew these aspects of Tlaxcala, but we also knew that Tenancingo is considered to be the hub for traffickers, okay? And there's a trafficking culture there. And you ask young boys in secundaria, or like in middle school, what they want to be when they grow up. And they all say they want to become traffickers. Why? Because they see in their neighborhoods, the traffickers have the biggest houses, they have the nicest cars, they spend all this money, you know? So there's this culture of traffickers that is admired in that area. up to 60% of the students were saying that. So that's alarming. That's alarming, right? And in Tenancingo, they do a feria, they do a festival every year for these traffickers. How do we know this? Well, I knew from before, like my friend has undercover like camera like footage from one of these festivals. But one day we were doing a block party in one red light district in Mexico City, and they said, and we went there, and there were hardly any girls working that day. And so we asked around, and we said, well, where are the girls? Like, there's hardly anybody here. And they told us, oh, it's because this weekend is the weekend of the feria in Tlaxcala, right? In Tenancingo. And so we're like, oh, okay. So what they do is during this feria, the padrotes or the tratantes, the pimps or the traffickers, they get all the girls, they round up all the girls, and they take them to do this huge festival. And in this video footage that my friend has, is they make them do this desfile. They do they parade the girls around, right? And then they want to show off who has the best girls. And then what happens is they take the best one and then they do a human sacrifice. Okay? This is demonic. This is straight from hell, right? So this is the community that has asked us to come in and to address the issue of human trafficking through this community center. Now, I was like, okay, I've been longing to do something there in Tenancingo, because that's kind of like, if we can cut that, it's cutting the head of the snake, right? You're cutting the head of the snake. So, but if we went in as a nonprofit and said, human trafficking is bad, you guys, this is an evil thing, you guys need to change all of your ways, this is all, kind of like, I don't know, like the preacher on the street corner that's just kind of like just fire and brimstone preaching judgment, it wouldn't work. They would probably like lynch us. We would probably like be run out of town. So we put a proposal in to the federal government last week. And the proposal is this. We look at the value, we're working towards creating value, intrinsic value within everybody that lives in Tenancingo and Tlaxcala. We want to create value within them so that they would be proud of who they are, proud of where they come from, proud of the industries that they provide, that they would have that sense of identity. They would have a sense of like prosperity within their own like economic situation, where they would choose not to do things like becoming a trafficker, right? This is a long-term game, right? But we already know that we need to start doing some type of engagement, engage the community, and continue to develop this. But in the heart of it is we want them to see themselves as God sees them. That's at the heart. To look at, I don't know if you've heard the term original design, like that. We want them to understand what their original design is and what is original design of Tlaxcala. in Tenancingo. We want to do, and what we're going to be working on is we've identified these key industries, right? Like for example, the carpentry, ecotourism, all these things like that we're going to start highlighting. How are we going to highlight it? For example, with the ecotourism, in my talks with the CEO of Google Mexico and their top people within YouTube, they work directly with their influencers to help kind of curate their content and help like promote it well, and to connect with the right people who want to promote it, like, you know, patrocinadores, like the, how do you say that in English? The sponsors, right? Trying to find good sponsors for their, and so all of these things are, you know, they said we want to, so we have pendiente, we have next on our list to go and speak with them, because they've already offered these influencers to us. Okay, we want to speak with the influencers who just do travel, and we want to go and pay for them to go into Tenancingo multiple times and do these videos, amazing videos, to help raise like the tourism there, right? That's an action item that's thinking more ecosystem and not for specific benefit to me, but it's a benefit to the community. And if it benefits the community, eventually I'm understanding this ecosystem of that web of interconnectivity and how we all work towards the same goal. Okay. For instance, another thing that we want to, so I mean, you guys understand where I'm going with this, right? So there's more about creating their value, intrinsic value, so that they're not going to make these choices. Now, in those meetings with SEGO or the federal government, they said, so next year in 2024 are the presidential elections, right? So they said, well, you know, we would love for you to deliver on these things sooner. And we were like, and they said, well, we know this is a long-term goal, long-term plan. It's great. We will buy into that. But we also need some deliverables before next year so that they can say they did stuff. Okay. Now, like personally, I'm politically agnostic. I'm politically neutral, right? I try not to take sides. I try to see things for what they are. Okay. I don't say like, oh, I'm this. I don't like those labels, right? But when I see what this happened, I was like, okay, I have a choice. Do I reject what the federal government is offering because they need something in return for their own benefit, right? Or do I continue to interact with each other so that the greater good at the end of the day is accomplished? So my confidence is not necessarily in me or what the government can or can't do or how they're trying to manipulate things. My confidence in what God wants to accomplish through me and even through them. So what was key and important for us was we said, okay, what is that list of things that you want? And they gave us this list. And we looked at the list and it was like their job. Something that they're supposed to be doing, right? And so I was like, okay, we'll do it. Why? Because when when in this ecosystem, there are going to be the give and takes involved, right? I realized what is very important is that what nonprofits we offer, we have like already available to us, like whether they be nonprofits or ministries, we have like solutions-based tools or approach. We have assets that can be leveraged into engaging with communities. We already have those things. Like that, we have those tools in our tool belt. We also have experience, field experience. So we know the issues intimately, more than the government does. And also the nonprofit or ministries, they have connections. They're probably of the most connected and most networked between like an NGO, government, and private sector, right? We're probably of the most, hold on 1 second. So we're probably one of the most connected. Now, government, I mean, connected in like tangible, real working like relationships, right? Government has authority. They have operational authority and they have legislative authority, but they also have access to spaces, access to certain facilities, access to certain connections that you can go in and gain authority right away. In the private sector, I realized they have a lot of innovation and technology. Of the three, it's like they have that they can bring, and then or the products and services that they offer, right? That is unique to them, right? That like a marketing company, they're better marketers than the government is, and they're better marketers than an NGO could be, right? So they have that benefit, and they also have a consumer base that can be leveraged in all of these interactivities and ecosystems. And they have finances, right? So all of these things are kind of like the resources or assets that are in your hand and ready to engage and involve. So since we have that, those tools and assets and that solutions-based approach, we can answer these things that the government needed from us, which will give us operational authority, because that's what they're offering towards us. Okay, so there's a constant interchange of these things that need to happen in order for, going back to the original example I was using about the tax deduction for a gift, so that it can start institutionalizing things that will benefit society as a whole. Now I'm going to close with this. So, and I talk about it within the school, right? So what I see is this globally, I see this huge movement of young people rising up, wanting to do great things for God, or they want to see the world change, and and I really believe that this generation is ready more than ever. And so I see a lot of those expressions played out, where they're in these larger like outreaches and evangelistically focused spaces, right? But they're starting to ask the question, what impact is this really having in society? What impact is this really having with the problems that we're all facing? Like, I went and I prayed for 20 people and they were all healed and they received Jesus today, but we still have poverty, we still have crime, we still have human trafficking, we still have all these things that are going on, right? So although they might have this sensationalism of like what's happening, there's still like, it's not grounded. Okay. On the other side of this spectrum, I'm going to use this kind of more like spectrums, or rivers. I like to see like rivers, or like flows of like thought and activity. You have those people who are really like on the ground fighting for justice. They're fighting for justice. They're in the trenches. They're doing things to kind of see more of tangible justice. No more crime, no more human trafficking, no all this, right? But they take on a very humanistic approach. Now, the humanistic approach meaning they have systematized everything, a process, they have metrics, they have, all of these indicators, and they're measuring things, and mostly because they have to report on all this to their donors, for foundations. When they need money, they need all that stuff organizationally and institutionally, they need to kind of like measure up all these things. But they're also a bit cynical too, because they're like, well, as much as we do, like, what needs to change is their heart. They need to have transformed mind. And no matter how much therapy or psychology you apply, they're still stuck, because they know that the only thing that can change that person's heart or mind is the Holy Spirit. Right? So on this side, we have this like group of people who almost are very spiritually Gnostic. Like Gnosticism is just basically saying everything's a spirit, and ignoring anything that has to do with flesh, right? Or like tangible things. Like, and so they're just constant, it becomes very Gnostic. And then this side, it becomes very humanistic. And I believe, and part of like the heart of what Justice School is really bringing these two rivers together, right? Because we need each other. It's not about one way is better than the other. It's about the both and how do we interact with one another better? How do we do the things that really are in the trenches to fight for justice, while having, on the other hand, a heart for revival and a powerful move of the Holy Spirit? Those two things need to go together. And that's what makes Justice School unique. It's because we don't feel like we can just give you this or this. We have to give it at the same time. Because that's the only way we're going to start seeing transformation happening in our world. I have friends on both sides, and I'm constantly pulling on them both, constantly challenging them on both sides. Because I feel what the Lord wants is that justice and worship hand in hand. Hand in hand. That's it, Elisa. I don't know if you have any more questions.
Great. Can you guys hear me? Because you're all frozen, so I'm not.
Yeah, we hear you good.
Okay, perfect. We went right into the topic. That's awesome. I hope you guys have a lot of questions now. That was the whole purpose. So you come and take the school. No, but I actually once heard that questions are the most essential thing for discipleship, and I think that's a really good point, that we need to ask questions to grow. So questions are not a bad thing. Anyways, so I don't know if you have any questions right now about the school or about what Benny said. Do send an email.
Well, Elisa, your audio is kind of crackling.
Well, if there
Yeah, if you have questions, feel free to go ahead and just unmute your mic and you can ask them.
So I have a quick question. Obviously, I know, like, from what I understood from what you were sharing, Benny, mainly Justice School is to understand like prevention, intervention, restoration, and all that, and how to implement it. I'm assuming in your area of ministry, but obviously in the realm of fighting against sex trafficking. Would you say that that's correct?
It's actually it could apply to like the issues that you're going to touch on. Yes, they are, and a lot of the examples that are used will be human trafficking, but it's not exclusive.
Okay.
So a lot of the concepts are transferable to any context.
Okay, gotcha. I just asked that because I'm wondering, like, when you guys think of the, like, if there is like an end goal, what does that look like after Justice School?
Yeah, and so that's why it's Justice School, because it's not just because it's a sexy term or anything like that. It is because we don't think justice is, I mean, it's not just exclusive to human trafficking or that cause,
Right.
but there are people who take it who are already like on the field, but they may not be within a anti-trafficking organization. They might be just in doing something, might be dealing with homelessness or something like that.
And then with that, would you guys suggest that, because it's 6 months, right? The school?
No.
How long is it?
There's online, there's 3 sections. There's one is the fundamentals of justice. And then there's inner healing. And then the third one, I forget what it's actually, the term. And I forget what it is exactly.
Okay.
But it's about the practical application.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, the practical, and it's more about it has a lot to do with team dynamics, organizational structure, stuff like that.
Okay, so it's hands-on.
You can take it in pieces.
Okay.
And then I think Elisa's writing it there. There's fundamentals of kingdom justice first, and then there's inner healing. I think they each last about 3 to 4 weeks.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and then in the summer, summer, we have it'll be algo presencial. We'll do an in-person, so it'll be practicum, theory and practicum. So basically the same thing that we do online, but in-person training, more interactive, and then also practicum where you're actually going out and serving.
Okay.
In our different programs.
Okay, gotcha. I asked that because I'm wondering if you guys usually suggest like some sort of inner healing before starting the school, but I see that there's an inner healing like part to it. So
yeah.
Okay.
So the residential school in June will be the same content of all those 3 modules. So if you take the residential one, it's kind of like you don't need to take those 3 online course, right?
That's correct. But we've had people who have taken it a couple times, like because they yeah, and then so the online is pre-recorded, like Elisa, she's saying it a couple times and she learns new stuff every single time. But the benefit from doing it in person is actually the fellowship, the interaction, seeing Elisa in person, seeing me in person, eating tacos, stuff like that. Oh, we can't hear you, Elisa.
Okay.
I don't know if it's your headphones. Did you maybe there you can change your headphones? I'll put them away. Okay, so the crackling is gone, but now we can't hear her. But any other questions? Oh, okay. I didn't know. Elisa's right now in Germany. She'll be here soon. But I thought that was non-existent within Germany. I thought all of Germany was super fast internet. No? She lives in the country. Yes.
So you guys had this program before, right? It's not the first time running. And like, what do you say, like, is a typical profile of people taking? Are people volunteering, or people having their own organization, working on the ground, on the field? What is like the, like the average profile?
Yeah, there is no real average profile that we have. So there's interest all across the board. And so, there's some people who just want to take it for the sake of like, learning and growing. And a lot of people just take Genesis Inner Healing because they just, they're messed up and they need to get healing. And then there's, but it's all across the board. We initially had put it together thinking that we wanted to really train up the next generation of justice fighters or justice people who are working in justice, but it's not exclusively that. We've kind of found that to be more, sometimes if you were to make that a common demographic, it's normally only like, 15-20%. Yeah. Good questions. Any other questions?
I have a question. I'm sorry for my English is not so good like yours, but how can I apply? I'm in Colombia now.
Okay.
I'm in a trip and knowing another countries, and how may do the course and apply this in my trip. How do you think about that?
Maybe I think Nani, I think maybe if you write here Elisa's email, and then you guys can interact with each other. I think it's elisa@27million.com. And so Nani, you can, and also Elisa speaks Spanish perfectly, habla español, entonces no se preocupe. You can write her. ¿Está bien?
Okay, thank you so much.
Perfecto. Perfecto. Increíble. Sorry, I need to practice my Portuguese.
Sorry, another question I just remembered. For the other two classes, the next following Thursdays, is it essentially this one, or are there two different parts that we should still attend?
Oh, it's free, so you don't, when they give out free samples, you don't have to eat the samples. So who's doing the next two? Elisa, do you know? Is just Janice doing one? I am? Oh, I'm doing the other. Okay, I can't hear her, but I guess I'm doing it again, but I'll probably talk about something else. No, yes, I am. I am. Yes. Yes. Okay. And
Okay, so we could join, but it's not.
yeah. It's not a requirement.
Okay, gotcha.
It's not, it's not a level to get to them to actually be allowed to apply.
Okay.
And then SG, I don't know if you learned this while you were here, but in Mexico, if you do this, that means yes. And Kyle should know that because of El Chavo del Ocho, you know? Sí, 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 sí. Okay, any other questions? That's it? Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time. And again, since it's a free sample class, you can invite your friends or anybody else who you think that would be interested in it. The more the merrier. But thank you for your time. I want to honor everybody's time here. I think we went a little over, but thank you so much and God bless.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Hasta luego. Ciao, ciao. Auf Wiedersehen.
Wow.